Hello and a very good day, everybody. 6 o'clock here in the UK, and so I've got my lemonade here, heavily disguised as a gin and tonic, and we can go through 3 particular antennas, but we're gonna do some stuff with them. All right, just make it a little bit interesting. All the things you can do, with a vertical and with a dipole, because with a dipole, it's the beginnings very often of lots of different antennas. So we need to understand the dipole and what happens when you raise the height, and where is it resonant and where's its next harmonic. We can do the same with the vertical, and I want to do a loop as well, and how we get gain in a particular direction, because that might be quite good fun as well. Right, so I've pressed some buttons here. We've got down here, there we are, my book, and periodically we can flick to another monitor I've got to my left here, just to show you some plots, all right, so you can visualize things that happen. So we'll start with a vertical, because it's really easy, and if you haven't built one of these, then, well, you should, because it's just a walk in the park. So to remind us, all right, very simply, a vertical is a length of antenna. I've got to say that I'm kind of not that technical. I don't want to admit it, but I don't like to pretend I'm that technical. So what I like to do is build things for $5 to see if it works. As long as you've got a bit of coax, going back to the shack, all these things you'll be able to do. If we have just a ground-mounted vertical with a few radials, for about 8 verticals upwards, you don't need 120 radials. That was for a shortened antenna that Dr. Brown, RCA Labs, and his colleagues realized that with a very short antenna on the broadcast band, they needed lots and lots of radials, otherwise they're losing efficiency. So I go with about 8 or 16. And in fact, you don't have to have them all at a quarter wave. You can cut them in half and then put them back into the system. So you've got the same amount of copper, make them 1/8 of a wave. And I've gone as low as about 10 feet, actually, on 80-meter band on holiday. I was quite surprised. So, vertical. I will sort of colour it in a little bit more in red so we can see what it is. Now, that is generally a quarter wave. It can be a 3/4 wave, but let me just talk about a quarter wave at the moment. Well, I'm not going to go into all the details, but basically, if you're using insulated wire, well, any wire will have a bit of a velocity factor. So if you're measuring it out, and you've got a tree, and you fancy the idea of building a quarter wave, I've got a green pen somewhere. Just have a look. It'd be nice to at least put a tree in green. So we got this tree, and we're going to hook our wire onto the tree. And now I'm in meters, because I'm in the UK, and I'm not very good at feet, but about 30 feet, all right, for the 40-meter band. And we'll put that here. So our coax, just a reminder, just in case we're not all stupid here. At the end of our coax, we've got the braid, haven't we? And then we've got the centre conductor. The centre conductor is the bit that goes straight up the pipe. And the braid we connect to our radials, which you can do with a brass earthing block, wrapping bits and pieces together, just having some fun. Right, now that will radiate, and I've prepared something for you. That will radiate a little bit like this one, which I'll maximise. If you can see that, looks like this. And if we look at our little far field plot, we'll zoom it in a bit. And you've probably all seen this in the books, haven't you? It's the same all the way around. Now, we'll talk about the benefits afterwards, all right? So that is a vertical. Now, the vertical is going to resonate on its harmonic, on its fundamental frequency, and also its harmonic. So that will be, if you've built something for 7.2 megahertz, it will also be resonant, technically, at 21.6. It doesn't actually. That's something called end effect and everything else. There is a trick if you wanted to multiband 40 meters and 15. And the trick is, if you take the top cut about 3 feet off the top, and instead of it going straight up, take twice as much of it on the way back down, and you'll find, because of end effect and a few other things, you'll be able to trim that, the bit that comes down. You'll get 15, and you'll get 40 meters as well. In fact, what happens? Well, I won't go into all the details. We can look at that in a little bit. But on 15 meters, on average ground, a 3/4 wave will look rather pleasant. If you're on very good ground, you'll find that a quarter wave will work better. So if you're by the sea, by the ocean, your quarter wave is going to be just phenomenal, all right? And will beat anything. It always defeats me, actually, why these expeditions go to these far-flung islands with all this equipment, and they try and put a Yagi up at, just 20 foot or something. And not very often they're by the ocean. I don't understand why they just don't put a vertical up. But, whatever. We can have some fun with verticals as well, because what we can do, we can take our vertical, and I'll redraw it here. Take our vertical, and just under a quarter wave, all right, about 80% of a quarter wave. We can put another one, and we can make it slightly longer, about 5%. But this time we short the radials to the element itself, and so just like a Yaki, it will act like a reflector. Okay, and we'll end up with a rather pleasant, a slightly more gain in that direction. Of course, there's another way of playing with verticals as well. What we could do, we can make them both exactly the same size, and we can take our coax, which we'll have in red, I think, and we can take our coax, and we can come effectively to a T-piece here, and we can feed them both. Now, normally, these would be a very specific length long, and normally a quarter wave with 75 ohm coax and stuff to get a really good match. But ignoring all that, what we can do is we can put a relay in situation and add in a little bit of coax. This is 72 degrees apparently is the best. A little bit of coax. So if a full wavelength of coax is 360 degrees, we can put 72 degrees of coax in here and switch it either that way, or we can switch it that way. And where the longest bit of coax is, will give us our delay line, and that becomes our reflector. So now all of a sudden, you've got a situation where from the shack, you can fire 12 volts to a relay, and then you can have it going either way. Or if you left it out of line, what you can do is have it what they call broadside, so you can go that way and that way at the same time. So there we are. And then lots of other things you can do. I mean, what I discovered, of course, with the whole DX Commander world, is that I had and it's a fluke how this happened, although I've since found it in the 1959 ARRL handbook, which was the year I was born. What you can do is you can have your radials at the bottom here, and you have a sort of I call it a driven plate at the bottom, and you can have more than one element. You could have one here and one there, and then by cutting these at different lengths, you'll find when the wigglies come down the coax, they will auto magically go up the right element. So, and I've got as many as 7 coming off these. It's quite good fun. So you can have any band you want at a quarter wave. Right. So we can come back to that in a minute. I'm just checking my time. We've had about 11 minutes. All right. So part out there. Let's move on to a dipole. So, all right. So it's quite. Funnily enough, before I did this tonight, I had to double check a couple of things. But a dipole generally, I mean, you can have any shape you want, can't you? And you really can have any shape. I've had some very strange shapes. You can have an inverted V, but let's just start with a flat top a minute. Flat top dipole. You've got 2 big trees, whatever, which would be fun. and you've just stretched it out. Generally, the thing actually sort of V's itself, doesn't it? Because you've got the weight and stuff. I sometimes find another tree, just lift the top up a bit, just to keep it flat or whatever else. Now, I don't know about USA, but in the UK during the day, we really like 40 metre band because the UK is quite a small country, and on 40 metres with a very low to the ground dipole, we can achieve 300 to 400 miles quite comfortably with an extremely low to the ground dipole. So I particularly like that for daytime. So we'll start off there and gradually move up and then work out where the harmonics are. I'll kind of do now. The harmonics on a vertical are exactly the same as a harmonics on a dipole, which is every other harmonic, if you like. So if we start off on 7 megahertz, the next harmonic is going to be 3 7s at 21 and 5 7s at 35 or whatever. But if you make it a different size, obviously, by multiplying by 3, by 5, by 7, you'll find all the harmonics. So it's not every harmonic. If we want every harmonic, we can go to a loop, which we'll cover in a minute. Right, so let's have a look at what happens at, let's say we've got this for the 40 metre band at a quarter of a wavelength above the ground. All right, so it's not terribly high. A quarter of a wavelength is, a medium-sized, fairly robust tree. If we can get it up there, we got all the practicalities of the trees moving around in the wind and trying to snap our wires and everything, which we've all had. And there's a few ways around that, which we can cover if you wish. But so, effectively, if we do a quarter wavelength above the ground, and I'll go to my monitor over here, and we'll have a look at this one. So this is what our bubble of RF would look like if we transmitted a quarter of a wavelength above the ground. You can see it's completely different to the vertical, but there's some benefits and there's some downsides and everything else. It just so happens that for daytime on 40 meters, if you enjoy that very loud 300 to 400 mile, which is your county, very often. I don't know how much 300 to 400 miles doesn't go you very far in the US, but I happen to like it. Similar on 80 meters as well. But so that's the same plot as doing the 20 meter band at 5 meters off the ground, 20 something feet. That's exactly the same. All right. So let's raise it up and just see what happens. So we can go to our calculate button and we can go to half a wavelength off the ground. So again, this would be 30 feet on the 20 meter band. So we can see we've got some really interesting lobes coming out the side. So the plot on the right is like the pavement view. If you could see the RF physically, coming off the antenna, you would see it would be glowing here like this on the outside. And we're looking at our element on the left-hand plot is going north-south. Okay, so our energy is coming off east-west here. So it's quite healthy actually on the edges, not so healthy in the other dimension. So that's at half a wavelength, at 3/4 of a wavelength, so it doesn't matter whatever you are, we get this big bubble of RF, which in the main we're not really interested in. We can throw that. It's not really wasted energy, because actually what we're achieving is something out on the right. And as we go higher and higher and higher, so we'll go to 40 meters. And now we are, in fact, a whole wavelength is about 42 meters long. We can get these fingers coming off here. Now, there is a bit of a gap between the two fingers. And you see, that's why there is not a perfect antenna, because we'll take Tim's big 40 meter tower, Tim Duffy, K3LR. So he's got, 3 or 4 element Yagi for 40 meters, at 200 feet and 100 feet. And the reason for that is that on the top one, it's fingers, right? There's going to be gaps in all the fingers as it happens. So if I just show you very, very high, or in fact 42. Let me think about this. So it must be about 70 meters. So let's just take a dipole at 70 meters. You can see all these gaps here as the fingers come in. So what they do on a big Yagi is you might have two, like a wavelength apart. You can switch between the two, and that will cover the fingers. So if you get the fingers there, then you can switch in a different antenna or add them together to get a different pattern. So although I would love a 4-element Yagi at 200 feet, 40 meters, you can have a ball with that, couldn't you? But I would still need a low to the ground dipole for my daytime talking to my friend 200 miles away, down in Brighton, all right? Because it wouldn't achieve it. So there's no perfect antenna. They will do something a little bit different. But anyway, I am getting distracted here. I will press a button shortly. I'll go back to one wavelength off the ground and show you that. There, we got these fingers here. And there's the gap. So at just over 30 degrees, which is there actually, there's which actually it's a very, 30 degrees is normally an extremely handy jump, bop off the ionosphere. So for me, that would be 30 degrees, probably the other side of Germany, on 20 meters. Well, certainly 40 meters. But anyway, dipole. And of course, then we take our dipole, we can start doing other things with it as well. And I've recently, I built a small tower. It's all on YouTube. I call it a tower because, frankly, it sounds better. It's just a mast, right? But it's 50 feet. I'm trying to convert to. So I've got this mast, and then I built out of fiberglass poles a dipole for the 20 meter band, and I put a slightly longer reflector. All right, and that sits on the mast. So again, it's taking our dipole and just giving some gain. And sure enough, I could fire it up somewhere. I can see if I can remember it. I'm going to sneeze. Reopen. Oh, I've got it here. I can let you see it. So this is my antenna. I'll just quickly calculate that. Show you. So this is taking a single Yagi and putting a reflector, and that reflector was about 10 feet away. That's all. Again, that was homebrew, very easy to do, and I'm achieving some superb results. Again, with a dipole, and I'm getting where that red is. I'm getting some great results. Very happy with that. Right, so we'll just leave our dipole there for a minute, and I'll press a button so you can see me. So dipoles is the beginnings of TV antennas, Yagis as we know it, and everything else. The harmonics, as we've said, is every other harmonic. All right, so 714, 721, and that sort of thing. So a little bit restrictive, really, because if you build a 20 meter at 14 megahertz, whatever 314s are, 40 something, 44, 44 or something, it doesn't fit inside our ham bands. But a loop does. Now loops, I don't know what I've got. I just love loops. I recently built, in fact I filmed it just before Christmas, edited it, and launched it, the video. But I made a very small loop. I say very small. This is I've got to say, it's a horizontal loop. Okay, it's not a vertical polarized loop. Well, we'll do that with you in a minute. But a horizontal loop, if you've not made one, but you do need to track down or build a 4 to 1 balance. Now, I made mine triangular. I don't think the shape matters, particularly when it's fairly small. These happen to be equal size, X, Y, Z. and it's very low to the ground. It is literally, I can touch it. Okay, the reason being is because I've got a bit of a forest area where the factory is. I just couldn't get any. I wanted it higher actually, but I couldn't get it any higher. But I was amazed at just this thing which I could touch. I do some wire. It's a Kevlar cord military wire, so I happen to know it's very strong. Tensed it out really strongly again, and of course, being fairly low-ish to the ground, it means that the tree doesn't flex too much down there, so it should last, a couple of years or something. So there. Now I built this for 40 meters. And I made it because the other thing is, when an antenna is very low to the ground, it can be shorter. I always think about this. This years ago when I discovered this. I mean, I'm sure it's on all the books. I hate reading books. I just like going out and doing it. But when to remember myself what an antenna does as you lower it to the ground is that I was brought up by the coast, and we got seagulls, right? So when the seagull's flying along, it's got its wings outstretched like that, and when it lands, it brings its wings in. And it's exactly the same. An antenna, when it's low to the ground, can be shorter. As you lift up, it needs to be a bit longer. So your SWR, your tune actually changes. Now, loop, I made it literally, so a loop should have been, I think, 40, the spec said 42 meters, for 40 meter band. I cut it at 38, knowing I was probably right. And I was absolutely cock on, actually. Bearing in mind, it's very low to the ground. So whatever 38 meters is in feet, but it's about 10% less than the wavelength of the 40 meter band that I was interested in. So now I get a tune now on 7.2. I'm getting about 14.3, 21.3, and 28 point something. Can't remember 4. You would think mathematically that they would go up, but what's actually happening as you go up in frequency, because this thing is resonant, all bands, right? Every harmonic, the height above ground is changing for each of the frequencies relative to its wavelength. We've got end effect, that's not really happening, but there's a few variables that are happening. And it just so happens we get a tune on all this. Now, I've got one of these 2 VFO radios, proper 2 receivers. It's a Kenwood, but, like I think the FT101 MP, and going back 20 years, the FT1000 MP, it was quite in the 756 Pro 3 or whatever, the ICOM had 2 VFOs as well. And I like plugging different antennas into each ear, because you got more than 1 or 2 jacks on the back of the radio. So what I could do is I can transmit on my vertical on here on VFO 1, and I can listen on both that and the delta loop on any band, because it's a lovely little receive antenna. And the thing is about antennas and modern radios is there might not be that much gain on receive from the actual antenna, but if the background radiation is picking up, and I'm talking, your Christmas tree lights from next door and all that stuff, you can hit the preamp. Because these things, if it's low to the ground, generally pick up less baloney than a big high antenna or a vertical. So it's a great option for receive. However, I accidentally went on the 20 meter band, bearing in mind this was literally just over head height. I accidentally used it for transmit because I was getting a perfect tune, and I put a huge 4-to-1 homebrew bound in it. So, because I'm allowed 1,000 watts now these days, at the antenna feed point, I can go up to as many watts as I want, but at the antenna feed point, I'm allowed 1,000 watts, so I won't cook this big, heavy balun thing. And I've made contacts on 20, 15, and 10 at the kind of 1,500 mile mark, which really, really surprises me. Particularly into Italy for some reason, so the way it must be orientated, I don't know. But years ago, I could probably fish out a photograph, but that'd be very boring for you. We made one of these down the used to run the Scout Hut. Actually, it was about here, and this thing was enormous. we made this 160 meters all the way around, just under 158, and it was at 60 feet high. And I just got to find it. Oh, there it is there. And it looked a little bit like this here. We can zoom that in for you. It's a big triangle, all right? And where that little red dot is on the right-hand side is where the 4-to-1 Ballon was. And but what amazed me, and I mean, I think it works at, I don't know, 3.7 megahertz. I can't remember. This is in software, of course. I just can't remember. Oh yeah, you got a bit of a lump opposite the feed point. But what I really enjoyed about it is, as the further up you go, say 14.275, I think the general start on 20 meter band, it takes a while to get it going here, is we real world ground. So I must have pressed a button. Let's look at that in far field and zoom it in a minute. So this is just a piece of wire, all right, and I'm feeding it on the right hand side, and you can see this sort of purpley red here, and it was an insane bit of gain. I was running a pile up on the 20 meter band, and I kept turning the power down until people couldn't hear me, but people could still hear me. I can just tell you that for DX is coming in at about 5 degrees, and I'm getting 8.4 dBi there. Might not sound a lot, but our vertical would give us -5. So that's 10, 11, 12, 13 dB more. And the further up you go, the more insane the gain becomes. Obviously, you can't rotate this thing round unless you've got sort of massive wheels and things on, on the trees. But anyway, so let's have a look at this. It was insane. Here we are. So we'd call CQ, and one of these points would come alive. And a good friend of mine, Tim, M0URX, I mean, this is about 15, 20 years ago now. We used to have such a lot of fun because we had this sort of all band, from top band all the way up to, 6. In fact, we ran it on 70 centimeters as well. And because of the height, we're just getting out. But so if you've got 3 big trees in a club or in a park, that they don't mind you putting up, even temporary, you have to use one of those catapulty things, with the weight on the end. It's tremendous. So loops are just hilarious fun. So a vertical polarized delta loop is slightly different. It's that, I'll get my black pen. So normally, very often, I wonder if I can draw this. So this is a vertically, we're looking at this sort of, from the, 8 o'clock or something. So this is a vertical loop. So in other words, looking at the side, it's kind of triangulish. Now, as you rotate it round, we're looking over here, but a quarter of a wavelength down the wire here, you get an impedance of about 100 ohms. There's a way of matching that, which is a quarter of a wavelength, 75 ohm, at less velocity factor, bit of coax, and then you can swap to normal coax. And this starts to behave like actually a pair of 2 phased verticals. The one we did here. There we are. It starts to behave like this one. All right. So you got slightly more gain between here. So our RF would be going that way. Now, I have built one of these. I just wasn't impressed with it. I don't know why. I took a lot of effort as well, because you need a fair amount of height to get to here, if you know what I mean. You need it 6-7 foot off the ground, so people don't. Otherwise, you'd have to start calling it, the guillotine, right? Because people get their heads cut off. But so you just got to be careful, how height. It doesn't really matter if it's 2 foot off the ground or 8 foot off the ground. It doesn't seem to matter, particularly on the maths anyway. But I haven't spent much time building that. But again, it would be, well, depending on how you fed it. But in the main, that is a monobander. All right. It gives you a little bit of gain through the middle. I just don't see the benefit, particularly unless you definitely haven't got any sort of amplification and you've just got a single 100 watt radio and you want a kick, only about 3 dB, all right, and it's fixed. It's through the middle. It's not. I don't think it's even 3 dB off the middle here. But of course, we can take that loop, a vertical or horizontal polarized loop, and we could make some sort of a quad, right? Because that's so we've done we started with the vertical, didn't we? With the dipole and the phase verticals, the Yagi. Right, we've got the loop now. Now, how can we get some gain off this loop? So there is the concept of the quad, which is fundamentally a square, and that would be one wavelength, basically, all the way around. And then you can have another square behind it. So let's redraw this cube, and then we'd do another cube in different color here. And one would be slightly smaller than the other, and the one that's slightly bigger would be the reflector. All right, and then we feed this, all right, with our coax. Now that works like it's similar to Yagi. They do say, I don't know why. They do, and I am about to build a multi-band version of this, but they do say a quad. It's got great ears. I've done the maths. And to be honest, the difference on paper between a quad and a Yagi, they're roughly similar heights. A 2-element quad this is, and a 3-element Yagi is about the same. Right? I can't see the difference. But don't ever go on the internet and search what's better, a quad or a Yagi, because you'll get the Yagi people waving the flag around, going, "Oh, the Yagi is much better." And then you'll get the quad people going, a quad is much better. It's one of these chalk and cheese things. So I need to find out for myself. All right. The consensus of opinion in the main is that it seems to hear a slightly better. There we are. Now you can multiband these by having a spider in the middle, right, to hold it all together. Right. And then if that's the 10-meter one, you can have one bigger. All right, and then one bigger again, and then one bigger again, and a bit like a hex beam, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. All right, and all of a sudden you've got this huge thing. The only disadvantage is on a quad like that is that you really need separate feed points for each of your elements. That's all. So. It's not surprising. Not many are sold. I don't know why I'm putting all my eggs in one basket and building one of these. But, well, the story is I got given a beautiful manufactured custom spider, with the 8 legs coming off it. Just that bit. And the man, I was helping him clear out his shed. He was a very old fellow. And I said, I've always fancied building a quad. And he took it off the shelf and gave it to me. He said, well, go build one then. So I don't have an excuse, but I feel by accepting it, I've got a contract to build this quad. So I might as well go do it. Right? And that's what we're going to do. And if I like it, we'll put it into production. I don't think I'll sell a lot. I should have really thought to myself, we'll launch the DX Commander Hex Beam. I'll probably sell more, but we're kind of flat out anyway. So if we sell, 50 in a year, that'd be fine.